Hello, Nayli.
Hi, Maren.
How are you?
I'm good. What about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited about this session, Employee Happiness. And this is actually also my first LinkedIn Live, I realized. It's not your
Exciting.
first, I know. But very exciting. And hello to those of you who are joining from the audience as well. If you are joining us today, we encourage you to say hi and let us know where you're joining from in the comments. Shall we allow 30 seconds more for people to join, or should I just slowly start?
I think we can slowly get started. And, people who are joining, please make sure that the chat is on fire and that you say hi to us indeed in the comments.
Exactly. So today we will have a chat on employee happiness and how to get it right. In February, Nayli and I hosted a webinar on the same topic together with Microsoft. And the aim of today is to follow up on some of the questions that we got during the webinar, as well as give you in the audience the chance to submit additional questions. So if you're joining us again today after the webinar, please let us know in the comments. And if you're new, please also let us know that you're here for the first time. If you have any questions, you can also use the comment section to post them, and we will answer them during this talk or at the end. So at the webinar back in February, we talked about that not only does happiness impact our personal lives, but it also has an impact for businesses. It's been found, for example, that happy people are more productive, happiness can increase creativity, and happy people tend to stay at their jobs longer than unhappy people. So in short, we believe that happiness deserves to be a part of any business's agenda. And around the world, people are generally happy at work. That's a good thing. According to Mindspace Employee Happiness Survey, many people are very happy. I think that's 30%. Most people are happy most of the time, 54%. And some people are not very happy, 13%. And few are not at all happy. That's a 3%. Nayli, do you know where people are happiest at work? In which
I read
country?
I read a book that was about why Danish people tend to be super happy. I believe that they usually get on top of lists that are about, where do the happiest people live in the world. So if I had to take a guess, I would guess Denmark.
Denmark? Yeah, well, it's a quite good guess. Well, one of the countries is very dear to you. It's the Netherlands, and then the US. So the Netherlands and the US is said to be countries where people are the most happy at work. Do you want to have a guess at the country where people are the least happy?
I would guess. Good question. I would guess perhaps Japan.
Japan? Oh, that's an interesting question or answer. It's actually in the UK.
Oh, okay.
On the other hand, I read that Scandinavian countries, namely Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, are the only countries to have a word for happiness at work.
Okay,
and you get 10 points if you know that word.
I have no idea.
No, it's arbejdsglæde in Danish and arbejdsglæde in Norwegian, and the Swedish. Yeah, I'm not gonna try that. I think it's something like arbejdsglæde.
Okay.
Anyways, Jeff Sachs, the co-creator of the World Happiness Report, he's also a professor at the Columbia University. He says that we find happiness in our own pursuits, like our professional work and passions. So maybe, Nayli, can you share the checklist?
Yes, absolutely.
Can we put it up? Because how do we align these passions and pursuits and make it a balanced approach? It's definitely a cocktail, and getting the chemistry right really depends on the different ingredients that you put into the formula. During and after the webinar in February, we got quite overwhelmed by the engagement and input on what you or what the participants believe to be important ingredients for employee happiness. And the checklist that you see on the screen right now is the result. So if you already haven't done so, you can download it from the link in the comments. Celine, our moderator of the chat or the comment section, will put a link up as well as a link to the recorded webinar. So yeah, because of the overwhelming engagement and the input that we got, and also because we had a really good time, Naily and I just decided to meet up again to speak a little bit more about the topic of employee happiness and discuss further some of the input that we got. So I think I want to give the word to you, Naily. Should we start maybe with a quick recap of the four pillars of the employee happiness model?
Yes, absolutely. And I see, welcome everyone in the audience as well. I see some people are there for the first time. Fantastic. Also, please feel free to ask your questions or share your input with us in the comments on LinkedIn. So if you believe that something is a crucial ingredient for employee happiness, what do you feel is important for that? Please share that with us in the comments, because then we can get a bit of a lively discussion going. But again, hi to everyone. Yeah, so back, Maren, indeed, to our employee happiness webinar that we did back in February. So what we did, we looked at the employee happiness model, and this is a model that has been developed by a company called Today's Mood, together with the University of Utrecht, and Utrecht is in the Netherlands. So they developed this employee happiness model, where they looked at 4 pillars that are important for employee happiness within organizations. And each of these 4 pillars has then some key drivers, and these key drivers, they are measurable, which of course is important for organizations, because then they can measure the impact of the efforts they are doing to make their employees more happy and more engaged. Now, what are these 4 pillars? And you can see it here in the checklist, which we, by the way, co-created with the people during the webinar. That was a lot of fun, as Maren said already, and we got a lot of valuable input. So the 4 main pillars for employee happiness are: 1, the organization itself; 2, the people; 3, the job. I would almost say, of course, the job as well. And 4, the well-being. And then, so each of these pillars, as I said, have a few key drivers, and we zoomed in on several ones. But so very briefly, and to give a really quick recap, for instance, the organization, what does that mean? That means it's important what the organization's visions and values are, and how they are being communicated to the people within the organization. And another very important thing is the organization's strategy, and that strategy as well is being communicated clearly to everyone within the organization, and that people know exactly what their own participation is towards achieving the organization's goals. So that, in a nutshell, is organization. The people pillar, what a very important element there is leadership, of course, because the leaders and the managers within the organization, they have a big impact in transferring the organization's vision and values, but also in making sure that the goals of their team members are aligned with those of the organization. And then another very important aspect here are the social values, and that is all about making sure that people feel safe enough to share their opinions and their ideas. Continuing towards to the job. Now, the job, there are several key drivers here as well, and one of them is learning and development. It's really important that organizations have a clear learning and development strategy in place, and that people within the organization know what that looks like and what their own career development or career path could look like within the organization. And then there's an important one that's here, intrinsic motivation. But we will talk about that a little bit later, so I won't say anything more about that for now. And then the 4th pillar is well-being, and there are several elements here as well, but the ones that we zoomed in on were really like the workplace environment, and it was also work-life balance. So that, Maren, I think in a nutshell, is a recap of what we were talking about during the webinar.
Indeed. A quick recap, and also during the webinar, but also on beforehand of the webinar, we got a lot of feedback, as I mentioned, and I think we got tons tons of people saying that flexibility was a really important ingredient to employee happiness. And I think that really taps into what you mentioned, the bullet point of intrinsic motivation. Can you explain what lies in intrinsic motivation?
Yeah, absolutely. So indeed, we got a lot of people giving us input that was all related in one way or another to intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is something that falls under the job pillar, and it really consists of three different elements. So the first one is all about the autonomy and the flexibility that people have as to how they do their job. So how much flexibility and autonomy do they get from the organization, from their manager, to decide how they think it's best to do their own jobs. The second element here is about having the possibility to continuously develop yourself, evolve, learn new things, and this is about what they call mastery. And then the third element of intrinsic motivation is about doing something that matters to you, and that's linked to purpose. So these three elements together, they make up intrinsic motivation, which is a super important part of people's happiness, because the job is, after all, something that you're doing every day, or at least almost every day.
Exactly. But I find this bullet point quite interesting because it sums up quite a lot of the essence of working, that lies within intrinsic motivation. So feedback such as I mentioned, flexibility, having a sense of purpose. I think someone mentioned as well, what was it? Having the space to develop yourself. Are they all parts of intrinsic motivation?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. If we look at the four pillars of the employee happiness, Nayli, are there any pillar that's been affected or more affected by the current situation of COVID-19? Has any of the pillars suffered more, so to say?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that, of course, all four pillars have been affected by the pandemic. I mean, organizations have, of course, all been affected by it. They had to often change the way they were working, and sometimes they even had to change the way they were doing business. So they have been impacted. People, I don't need that needs any explanation. The job as well, whether we are blue collar or white collar workers, everybody's job is probably been done a little bit differently than it was before. And well-being has also been impacted because a lot of people experience more stress or more anxiety with regards to what was happening, their health, but also sometimes their job security. So I think all four pillars have definitely been impacted. If I had to choose one that stood out, then I think I would, I would think that would be the well-being pillar, and then especially people's workplace conditions.
Yeah, of course. That makes sense. I could also imagine that a lot of pressure was put on the manager. During the webinar, we had a comment that stated that managers who are emotionally intelligent contribute to employee happiness. So what do you think about that, Nelly? How do you see the emotional intelligence of the manager affect employee happiness?
Oh, I think this is a very important part of the way people experience their job on an everyday basis. And I think the more a manager is able to connect with the team members and to maybe put themselves in their shoes and look at things from their perspective, and also show empathy when needed, I think the better, of course, people will be able to get through this still ongoing pandemic. So I think it's a very important element.
Yeah. Something that we didn't get the chance to discuss during the webinar, because I was so busy closing down because we went over time, was one of the last comments that came in at the end, and I think it's a really good question. It's also probably a quite hard one, but the question said that all the examples that we mentioned in the webinar were from the office area, namely from the home office area. People are isolated, people are challenged in their working space, and disturbed, blah 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 blah. Um, but this participant asked, what about the production people, the blue collar people? How are their employee happiness challenged, or during the pandemic, especially?
Yeah, I mean this is a fantastic question, and I would like to go back to our audience again. So, if you have any experience with this, any things that you have seen in your organization, if relevant, or that you have tried and worked, or maybe tried and didn't work, please share your experience with us in the chat. And also, still, if there are things that you feel are crucial for people's engagement and happiness within the organization, don't be shy and share it with us in the comments. Now, back to
Exactly.
your question,
Can I
Maren.
can I do one more input as well? If you see anything that's missing from our formula, please submit that as well.
Yeah, I'll put it up so that you can have a look. Um, Yeah, I think this is a great question, Maren, because I feel like we're talking a lot about the situation of people who used to be in an office and now all of a sudden are working a lot or all the time from home. We talk a lot about them, and we talk about their sometimes mental challenges, but also their physical challenges, and how we can keep people engaged remotely and how managers can deal with that. We talk a lot about that, and indeed, we do not talk as much about uh, the blue collar workers, which are, I believe, almost half of the workforce globally. So, I mean, this is a big part of the workforce that we, I believe, don't give as much attention to. So, this is a super good question. Now, I have to admit that I had to do some research myself to find some information as to how you can make sure that you look out for blue collar people and their wellness and also their happiness eventually during this current situation. And there were a few things that I found that were quite interesting. So um, the first one is quite practical because, of course, a lot of blue collar workers, they don't have the choice to stay at home, so they have to go out. They have to be out in the open, literally, working together with other people. They're often in touch with a lot of other people as well. So in terms of health and safety regulations, there have been quite a lot of things that have changed. All of a sudden, there are the social distancing rules to take into account. For instance, we have to think about working with smaller groups of people. Sometimes that means also a difference in shifts. So this also means, as an organization, that you probably need to rethink your onboarding when you're hiring new people, because your onboarding needs to take into account all these new rules and regulations. It also means that you need to maybe rethink your training so that people are updated on what the latest rules and regulations are when it comes to security and safety. Then another thing that I saw, and I found that an interesting one, is to be thankful. To be thankful as a manager and be thankful also as an organization, but to clearly also show that to your people. And it can be just as simple as saying to people, thanks so much for showing up. And I think that's actually a really good one because people, when they have to be, for instance, in a supermarket, being in touch with customers all day long, and in a way being confronted every day with the fact that we are all mortal, because you constantly see people wearing masks, having to disinfect their hands, etc. So there's this fact of being thankful and basically saying to people like, thank you so much for showing up, despite probably their worry or maybe their anxiety. So I think that was a really good one. I believe you were going to say something, Maren.
Yeah, no, well, I wanted, because I was going to ask you, like, how, because in this situation there are fewer things to be thankful for, and and like being thankful is not probably what I would go for the firstly, or like what would come up to my mind immediately. But as you went on, and it made quite sense, and also because the people who are facing the pandemic up front every day, it's we should all be thankful for them, but
Yeah.
it's not always the customers of the supermarket's responsibility to be thankful toward them, so it makes sense that the manager has an extra responsibility of really being clear on this point at this time. So it made
Yeah.
sense the more you talked. So
Because if you think about it, it's not that obvious for people to show up in these kind of
Mhm.
roles, because they do expose themselves, or they might feel that they expose themselves to more risk. And again, they may experience stress, they may be fearful about going to work. So the simple fact that they show up and ensure that the store can just go on, or that goods can still be delivered, um, all of these things. Or of course, people working in hospitals as well, where it's even more obvious what the risks are. I think it sounds indeed super simple, but I think it's something that people would definitely appreciate, that the managers realize, okay, they are here, and that is not something to take for granted, that those people actually showed up.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
I
I
could
found that a
imagine.
really important one.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah, yeah, me too. It's a game changer, definitely. I could also imagine communication is harder as well, because you cannot just send a Teams message to everyone when they're not online, seven
Exactly.
hours a day. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. So these were a few things that I found that I thought were good, and then there was another one, but that here I think there's not that much difference between white collar and blue collar. And it was about taking your people seriously, and then especially in terms of some worries that they may have, some fears that they may have. It was all about show them that you take those fears seriously, and that you,
Hmm.
as much as you can, try to do something about it, and that you're reassuring them. But I don't think this is very different from white collar workers, because they also have fears, and you also should take those seriously. But yeah, so these were some of the things I thought were interesting when it comes to blue collar workers.
Yeah, and I find this topic quite interesting because all fears are relevant, of course. When you're feeling anxious or worried, it's doesn't matter what for. The feeling is real, anyways. So if it's because you're being more inactive than you're normally is, or you're more active and you're more stressed out and you're more upfront, it really doesn't matter. The feeling is still real.
Yeah.
And yeah, and challenges are different for the workers that are facing the pandemic upfront every day. We have some questions left from the audience last time. I'm gonna skim through the chat real quickly. I think we have a lot of hellos. Please
Yes.
tell us where you're from, where you're listening in from. That's I find that quite interesting. I'm joining here from Denmark for my part. And Nelly, where are you located?
I'm joining from Paris.
You are joining from Paris. But
Mhm.
shall we go straight to the comments or the questions? We have some from the webinar last time as well. I guess we
Yeah.
can go through them.
And
So we have
in the meantime, I'll pull up the employee happiness checklist that we already pulled up a few times, so that, if you in the audience, you take a look at it and you feel like there's an important element missing there, please share it with us in the comments. So here goes. There's the checklist.
perfect.
If there's anything missing, or if you have a question about something, yeah, don't be shy and just drop it in the chat. Hi, everyone. Oh, wow. I see someone joining from Buenos Aires. That is
That,
far away. Hello.
that is nice. And
Okay.
early morning, I could imagine. Cool. So we had someone talking a little bit about communication and technology. So they said that the pandemic forced us to be more distant and avoid physical encounters. And they wanted to know how can they use technology to limit the misunderstandings in communication and decrease polarization. I'm thinking this is probably an example from the home office, chatting and yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think one way to do so, and it may sound very obvious and maybe too easy, but I think it really isn't. One way to do so would be to really listen, and not listen to reply as fast as possible, but really listen to understand. And I think, and that's interesting, I actually had a discussion with one of my colleagues about this morning, and what he said I found super interesting. He actually said, and he's a manager, that since we're working from home, it is whenever he has a one-on-one with someone, which basically means they have a video call, he said, it's just me and that person. So in a way that allows me to connect better with that person and to ask them for their opinions and to ask them for their feedback. So he said, in a way, for me, it is actually a much better way to create these relationships with the people in my team. And I thought that was a really interesting way of seeing it. And I could see what he meant by that. So, and he also said, because now actually I'm forced to have these one-on-ones with everyone in my team. And it's always just me and them in a video situation without distractions from other people walking by or knocking on doors or something like that. And I thought, actually, that was a good one. So I would, for one, say, try to really, really listen, especially also since a lot of the nonverbal communication that we usually have and that we look at, well, it's a bit harder, of course, to distinguish that when you're in a video call and when you're only seeing half of people's bodies. And the second one, and the second one is, yeah, no, that was actually the main thing, just to like try to really listen.
Yeah, and I think video is then essential, because I could imagine that there's a difference between a phone call and a video call as well, so turning on your video is essential.
Yes. So I see that we got a question from Joe in the chat, and he says, what would you say to a manager or business leader that says happiness doesn't have much to do with work? Work is work, just get the job done and be happy in your free time. Well, thanks, first of all, Joe, for the question and for joining the discussion. So, Mara, what are your first thoughts about that?
Well, I would my first initial thought was that, well, then I need free time all the time, because you cannot just turn on and off happiness, it really affects your free time, but it also affects the job, it's not something that you switch on and off. So
and I would
to choose, then it's either, then I need free time all the time, because being happy is essential as well, And what about you, Naomi? What do you say?
Well, I mean, I would say that if you look at everything we talked about during today's episode of Talent Talk Live, and we look at the elements that have been proven to have an impact on people's happiness and how they are related to work, because we were talking about work, of course, then it is impossible to make a distinction between, okay, you're at work, just get the job done and just be happy in your spare time. Those things go hand in hand. When people are happy, yes, when they're happy in their personal lives, but that needs to be a continuous thing. They need to be happy all the time, and you cannot separate those things from one another. So what would I say to a manager who has that point of view? Well, I'd probably invite them to take a look at the employee happiness model and the research that has been done about that.
And mention that, as I said in the beginning as well, happy people tend to be more productive, more creative. So it might also be a good business investment to make sure that you also do something for the employee happiness at work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. We got another question. It's also a little bit on the technology and communication. So it was a participant that stated that whether technology could leverage compassion. Basically, how do we keep the human elements in a world where we're quite isolated from each other, and we have this we are using technology instead of meeting physically, and how can we make sure that our communication reflects our human touch as well, so to say?
Oh, wow, that is a great question. I think we answered it perhaps a little bit when we answered the previous question about the dangers of technology creating more distance between us. But I think another element here, and this is something I heard when I listened to a podcast that was with the, I think, co-founder of Automatic, and that is the company behind, among other things, WordPress.com, which you may know.
Mm.
So they are a fully remote company, and they've, I believe, always been a fully remote company. And he talks about this as well. And so what he said, and I thought I thought that was super interesting. One of their values or things that they really try to live by is what they call API, and then API not in a kind of software related acronym here, but for them, what API stands for is assume positive intent. And that was then related to a lot of the chatting that we nowadays do at work, right? Because there's all these kind of chat systems and you chat with people. And as soon as you start writing, and this is also, by the way, what Henrik, when we did this webinar, we did it with someone from Microsoft, which was Henrik, and he talked about this as well. When you're chatting or writing emails, it is very easily to interpret things the wrong way. That's one reason why sometimes we use smileys to, make sure that it becomes a little bit lighter, or that people don't get offended or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what he said. He's like, for us, what we really try to do is like assume positive intent. So assume that the person who's writing something to you means well, and that if they give feedback, that is also meant well. So I think that is a really good thing to keep in mind. Assume positive intent. And what Henrik was saying about like adding the smileys and emojis, that can definitely help as well. And I think another thing here is that at some point, if you feel like a discussion or a chat is not going anywhere, perhaps just jump on a call to make sure that you actually understand each other. So I think that's one element that could be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. That I like that, and I like that API because I have a lot of colleagues and also friends who are, become worried if there's not a smiley or an emoji. They're like, are they mad at me? Like, yeah. So I think this just applying a little filter on assuming positive intent would go far. Yeah,
exactly. So nice. I see that in the chat, there's actually a really interesting comment from Amira. Thank you, Amira. And this is something, Maren, that we also, I believe, got quite a lot during the webinar, right? We did last month. So managers have a big impact on employees' moods as well. We were talking about that, Maren. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, we had a poll question during the webinar as well. And I think over 50% of people said that the manager was a direct influence on employees' moods, as Amira said, but also happiness.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And I mean, there is this famous saying, right, that they say people don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers. So I think that goes to show, and there's also research supporting that. If you look at the reasons why people leave their job, I still believe that higher salary and better benefits is probably one of the most important reasons, but a bad relationship with their manager is a big reason why people leave, indeed. So yes, Amira, you are definitely right. Managers have a big impact on employees' moods. So let me pull up our checklist again, because it should definitely be in there. I think we could definitely put that one under leadership, or perhaps even more specifically the relationship that people have with their manager. That is indeed a very important element and a very important factor of people's happiness and engagement at work. So thanks for that.
Yeah, that's nice input.
Yes, absolutely. And she's also actually following up saying encouragements are to be given, and given the opportunity to learn and adapt could also be a solution to get people happier at work. Yeah, that is also very true. Definitely encouragements. It's good to encourage your people, and indeed the opportunity to learn and adapt. That's something we already indeed added also to the checklist. It's about learning and development. And it's also, again, coming back to this intrinsic motivation, because the opportunity to adapt, that is basically about people having the freedom and the flexibility to do the job as they see fit, and to perhaps change the way that they do their jobs as well.
Exactly. I love the bullet point of intrinsic motivation, because it implies so much. Really, it's really essential. Nice. Thanks a lot, Amira and Neely. Shall we move on? Because I remember that during the webinar we were talking about job crafting. I think it was part of the tips. We gave some tips during the webinar for each pillar. Could you explain again how job crafting could be a good idea for employee happiness?
Yes, absolutely. So job crafting in a nutshell, because I think Maren, we could do an entire LinkedIn Live on job crafting as well. So
Yeah, let's
job
do it.
crafting, in a nutshell, is about giving people the opportunity to craft the job so that it fits them better. So I thought a really nice comparison was to look at the job as a semi-tailored suit. So
Mm,
the suit is there and you cannot really change that, but then you can still make small alterations to the suit so that it fits you better. And that's basically what job crafting does. So your job is there. Let's say that is the job and it needs to get done, but you can still make slight tweaks to it as an employee so that it fits you better. And so what should you then think of? For instance, make slight changes in the tasks related to a job, um, to the skills needed for the job, but also the people that you're working with. There's also a well-being part. So you can make slight changes that work best for you. And so what works for you, of course, might not work at all for your colleague who officially has the same job. And then you can just make sure that the job fits you better, which then has a positive impact on how you experience that job. Now, a question that we got, and it was a really great question, was what's the difference between job crafting and job design? Because job
mm,
design is
yeah.
also about changing those jobs. Well, job design is driven by the organization, so it basically comes from the top, whereas job crafting is employee driven. So this is
Okay.
really about making it better for the employee, which then will also by extension benefit the organization. And this is then, we could here on our checklist, we could link it to intrinsic motivation again, because it would be linked to this flexibility and autonomy that you give to people to do their job.
Yeah. I was just about to say that's intrinsic motivation again, again, again. I think we are getting towards the end. I think we should keep it at yeah. How long have we been on? 40 minutes? 30
Yeah.
minutes? Like that, 40 minutes, yeah. But I have one last question that I would like to ask you, Naily. And if you in the audience would like to pose any question, this is your chance. Please submit them now. But I want to ask you, Naily, if you were to place excitement, just the word excitement, where would you place it on the employee happiness model? Where would you link it? I came up with it, or the word came to my mind because I was checking, because before the webinar we got a lot of input in this form, and someone also submitted afterwards, and I was just randomly checking the form again to make sure, and then this word pops up, and it just says excitement and nothing else. So I just want to know, or I want to hear your opinion on where would you place excitement? How can you link it to this?
Well, I mean, my answer might not be the most exciting answer to make a joke about that, but I think I would place excitement perhaps at the heart. I'll pull up the checklist again, but I would perhaps place it at the heart of these four pillars. So
Hmm.
right in the middle of organization, people, job, and well-being, because I can explain, I believe that ideally people who work for an organization, they should be excited to work for that organization. They should be excited about the organization's vision and what the organization tries to achieve. But they should also be excited about the people they are going to be working with and their manager. Indeed, they should be excited about. They should, of course, be excited about the job that they're going to be doing, and they should be excited about their workplace conditions. So for me, I think it comes at the heart of the pillars.
And vice versa, the managers and the organization should also be excited about the new hire and or the employee in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Then we have excitement at the core of our employee happiness formula.
Mm.
Great, great. Do we have any more questions? I'm going to run through it a little bit. No, I don't think so. Do you have anything else to add, Naily, or have we covered what we wanted to cover?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much to our audience for joining us and for being such great participants as well.
right back at you. Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that our checklist on employee happiness can be downloaded from the link in the comments, as well as the replay. So if you want to watch the webinar that we did back in February, you can also download that. Once again, thanks a lot for all your engagements and input on the topic. We are delighted to see how many show an interest in this topic. And yeah, thanks a lot to you in the audience. Thanks a lot, Nelly. It's always a pleasure. And I
Yeah.
wish you a nice day.
Yes, have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye.